So inside of Excel, we've already seen how to do things like add data to our cells, use some real simple formulas like the auto sum and the auto average, and even how to auto fill data into other cells that we've already created. Now, let's take a look at some formulas that we're going to have to create by using some built-in functions that Excel provides for us. In these examples, we're going to look at using some text functions. And that's something that I used a lot in my career. Now, depending upon what you do in your career, you may find that you hardly ever use these or you use them all the time. Luckily, Excel provides us a lot of flexibility, a lot of functionality. We just have to figure out what is it that we're going to be doing with it. So let's take a look at these text functions and how we're going to work with them. So here I have two columns, one for the full name and one for a grade that people are in. Now, what I want to do is I want to take this information here and I want to take the name and split it into a first and a last name. And this is luckily very easy for us to do. So I'm going to come right here and just put my column headers to make it a little bit easier to work with. And what I want to do is I want to get the left side of my text up to the space, and that will give me my first name. So to do that, I need to know two things. Number one, what cell am I pulling information in from? And number two, where is that space? Well, we have a couple ways that we can do this. First, I want to show you how we're going to find that space. And so I'm going to come here to E2, I'll put equals, and if I start typing search, notice it's going to come up with some suggestions for me. In this case, returns the number of the character that I'm looking for. Okay, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to click on search, and the first is to find text. What am I looking for? So I do a double quote, space, and a double quote. That lets me find where it is I'm looking for. The second thing is within what text am I searching for? Well, in A2. Now I have a third parameter which is optional. That's the start number. So for example, if I know that I've got another space in there and I'm looking for a second space, I can say, hey, it's got to be after the first space. I can put that value in. We don't have that in this case, so we're just going to make this easy. I'm going to close the parentheses and hit enter. And notice it gives you the value of 6. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. That's great. Now, I can use this with my function. So I can say equals, and then I'm going to say left. Left is a special function. It's going to find everything left of a value. I can hit the tab key as a shortcut. Then I'm going to say, okay, where's my source text? That's going to be A2, so I'm just going to click on that cell, comma, and then how many characters do I want to get? Well, I'm going to click on that 6 from that formula I found. That's an E2, so we're using a formula to drive a formula. I'm going to hit the enter key. And when I do that, notice I get Rory. If I double click in it, I see my formula. Now, you may be looking at this going, well, now I have to create a formula for that one cell. I have to remember to keep track of that. And if I go to extend this down, you're noticing nothing's showing up because it's requiring this other field, and there's no data in those fields. So that's a real problem. So let me show you how we can fix that. We're going to start off doing the same thing. Equals left. Specify the cell that we're looking for. In this case, A3, because we're on the third row. Then we type in search. I'm searching for a space within A3. Close the parentheses, and that closes it for my search function. That result's going to automatically be returned into my left function. So I don't have to put it somewhere. I'm going to take those results and just automatically plug it into that new function. and then a second close parentheses, and that's going to finish out my left function. And notice as soon as I do that, boom, there's Macy. Now if I take this and I stretch them down, notice it automatically goes in and fills in for all of those columns. And so that's pretty simple. You might say, well, that's good, but how do I know what these functions are? Well, let me show you how we're going to do that when we search for the last name. So I can go to D2, and then before I start working on my function, I'm going to come up here to my formulas. And you'll notice I have several formulas drop downs. So depending upon am I working with date and time, or financial information, or math, or text, which is what we want, I can click on the drop down. And this gives me a list of everything I want to pick. Now, if I put my mouse cursor over it, you're going to notice it's going to let me kind of have a little definition for what this function does. In my case, I want to use right because right is going to find the right-hand side of text or anything that's after where I tell it to look. When I click on that, it's going to come with a little formula box for me to use, and I'm going to specify my text to start with. And then I need to know how many characters. Well, I know how to find the space, but that only gives me a number from the left side to that space. I want to get the rest of them. So I'm going to type in length, L-E-N, for A2, minus search. Once again, put the space inside of double quotes, comma, A2, and I'm going to close that out. When I do that, it says, well, how long, the len is how long is my overall text. Then I subtract out from that space. That gives me the remaining characters. So it says, get me the last 7 characters or the last 10 characters or last 4 characters, whatever it needs to be. So I'm using some real basic math, just addition and subtraction, some built-in functions, and now I have my first and last names throughout my whole list. All right, so let's take a look at what else we want to do. And these are all very common things that we have to do. So we have the full name, we have the first and last name, but sometimes we want to provide it in a last comma first format. So let's show you how to do that real quick. I'm going to come here, and there's actually a couple different ways to do this, but this is an easiest way. I'm going to say I want Wheeler. And then if I want to add 2 cells together, 2 text cells together, I can use the ampersand sign. I'm going to do double quote, comma, space, and a double quote, another ampersand, and then C2, which is my first name. When I do that, I now have my last name, comma, first name. This is called concatenation. There's actually a concatenate function, but this is a lot easier to use, at least in my opinion. If I want to do something like, and this was a common thing I had to do, working in IT, we had to create from people's names, a lot of times their usernames. How would they log into the system? And so we would do something like the first letter of their first name and their whole last name, and that's their username. We also might do, and as we've added more and more users, we went to a first name dot and the last name. Well, concatenation will allow us to do that very easily. Now, on the other hand, sometimes we also need to convert that into a lowercase. So let's take a real quick look at how we're going to do this. I'm going to say equals lower, and that's going to convert all the letters in a string to lowercase. That's what I want to do. So my question then becomes, what do I want to do? Well, I want to take that first name dot last name and convert it to all lowercase so I can create their email address. So I'm going to say Rory ampersand quote dot quote. Notice that I did not put a space in there because I want this to be joined together. You've probably seen email addresses like this before. ampersand, choose the last name, and that's going to take it and make it all lowercase for us. Now, you're going to notice that we do have one minor issue with this, and there's a space after Rory and before the period. You might say, well, where did that come from? I don't see it anywhere. Well, it's really easy to miss, and that's because it's at the end of Rory here. It's not in my formula. It's at the end of Rory. That's because we got the left up to and including that space that we found. So let me show you how to fix that real quick. So here I'm getting left, A2, and I search for that space in A2. But I actually only want to go one space before it. That way I don't have that space in there. So after my search, I can do -1. Now watch what's going to happen to my Rory.Wheeler. As soon as I do that -1, it shifts it over because it took out that space. And because everything is being designed and built off of those previous formulas that are used, it automatically fixes it for me. I'm just going to double click on my little square to copy that fix down to everyone else. Now I have here converting lower to that name. If I want to add the email address suffix, where you say at and then yourcompany.com or something like that. I'm just going to, after my lower, because I don't need to lowercase the rest of this, I'm going to say ampersand at example.edu. Now notice that it gives a full email address. And so this is quite often how we do basic things like this in IT all the time. We be given a spreadsheet of new employees that come in, and we have to go in and fix it so we can load it into our system. It's a pretty simple process to go in and do, just using some basic Excel formulas. If you click on any of these cells, you'll automatically see, you know what? It's not those values in there. It's all formulas based upon what you see on my first column, my left-hand side. So I can take this information, I can use it. You'll notice that we didn't have to use a grade column. A lot of times you don't use every column. You just use the ones that you need. And so always be looking out for that and say, okay, do I need this column in this formula or not? Do I want to add this or not? So now I want to repeat these two columns all the way down. So I'm just going to select the two of them, double click on my little box, and it's done. So real simple, easy way to use some basic text formulas, things that are pretty common that you're going to see in a lot of different instances.